Jack and the Beanstalk. Once upon a time there was a young boy named Jack who lived in a little cottage on a farm with his mother. They were very poor and their only possession was a cow named Daisy. One day Jack's mother turned to him and said, "We have no more money for food and our crops are not doing well, and Daisy has stopped producing milk, so you will have to go to market to sell her." This made Jack very sad, but he knew that they needed this money for food. The next morning, Jack started on his way to market with Daisy the cow. Along the way, he met an old man who stopped and asked Jack if he would like to buy some magic beans. Jack told the man that he had no money to spare, but the old man thought for a moment and then said, "I will give you these magic beans in exchange for your cow." Jack was very pleased with this. He handed over the cow and ran back to the cottage to tell his mother. But Jack's mother was not pleased with him at all. "How could you give away our cow for a handful of beans? These will not feed us," she cried. She snatched the beans from Jack's hand and angrily threw them on the floor. The next morning, Jack awoke to something rather peculiar. He noticed that a plant was blocking the sun outside his room. He opened the kitchen door to see, and in the place where his mother had thrown the magic beans, a beanstalk had grown overnight. He went outside and looked up into the sky to see where the beanstalk ended, but it simply went on and on. Jack was very curious about what could be at the top of the beanstalk, so he decided to climb it. He climbed and climbed and climbed, and eventually reached the top, where he found a huge castle with an enormous door. Jack was feeling very brave, so he ran swiftly and quietly to the huge door and crept inside. Inside the house, Jack saw a giant table, a giant chair, giant pots and pans, and a giant lady. He watched in amazement. Suddenly, the giant lady looked down and saw Jack hiding behind the leg of the table. Bending down to him, she said, "What have we here?" Jack was terrified and shivering with fear. He said, "Please don't hurt me. My name is Jack and I mean no harm." "I will not harm you, but I fear that my husband may not be so happy to see you. Quick, you must hide in the oven, because he will shortly be coming here for his breakfast." Placing him in the oven, she went back to her work. Suddenly, the floor began to shake, and in stamped the giant. He was a terrifying sight. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Don't be silly," said the giant's wife. "There is no one here." So the giant sat down and began to eat his breakfast. When he had finished eating, he called to his wife to bring his bag of gold, and Jack saw the gold shimmering in the light. Soon the giant began to fall asleep. Jack dashed over, grabbed the gold, and quickly climbed down the beanstalk. Jack and his mother lived on the gold coins for a while, but eventually they were all spent. So one morning, Jack climbed the beanstalk for a second time. Standing in the kitchen was the giant's wife. "What are you doing here? You must hide, as my husband is on his way down for breakfast." Suddenly the floor began to tremble, and in stomped the giant. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." Once again his wife told him that there was nobody there, and he sat down to eat his enormous breakfast. When his plate was empty, he said to his wife, "Bring me my hen that lays the golden eggs." Jack watched with interest as the giant's wife came back with an ordinary-looking hen. "Lay," the giant commanded, and the hen quickly produced 3 golden eggs. With his stomach full, the giant slowly began to fall asleep. Jack jumped out, grabbed the hen and ran towards the beanstalk. As Jack started to climb down, he heard the giant roar with anger. "Arr!" Then he heard his heavy footsteps chasing after him. But Jack was too quick, and he had climbed down the beanstalk before the giant could see where he had gone. A few days later, Jack climbed the beanstalk again and once more crept into the giant's kitchen. Again the floor began to tremble, and the giant's wife walked in. Seeing Jack, she urged him to hide as the giant was coming soon. Climbing into the oven, Jack hid and watched as the giant entered the kitchen. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." Once again, the giant's wife reassured the giant that there was no one in the house. The giant sat down to eat his food, and after he had finished his meal, he said to his wife, "Bring me my magic harp." So his wife brought him his harp and placed it in front of him. "Play," he commanded. Immediately the harp began to play beautiful music all on its own, and slowly the giant began to fall asleep. Seeing his chance, Jack raced across the kitchen floor, grabbed the harp and dashed off down the beanstalk. However, when he glanced behind, he saw that the giant was following him. When he reached the ground, he called for his mother to quickly bring him an axe, and he chopped down the beanstalk in one go. The giant came heavily tumbling down, disappeared into the ground, and he was never seen again. Jack and his mother now had enough money, and they lived happily ever after in their little cottage. The end.